One of my favorite things about tapping and EFT is how simple it is to explain. On multiple occasions, I have explained and taught tapping to total strangers with a little drawing the back of a bar napkin in under 3 minutes. But just because something is simple, just because it's something that is simple to access, doesn't necessarily mean that it is easy. Tapping is something that on the surface is simple, but when we dig into it, there's so many nuances which allow us to get even more out of every single round of tapping. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a bunch of demonstrations and answer a bunch of questions of my students on how to get more out of tapping, so you have the opportunity to learn right along with them. Hi, my name is Gene Monterastelli. I am the editor of tappingqa.com, and one of my most favorite things in the world right now in my practice is something called office hours. For my students who are enrolled in my program, 4 times a month, we jump on Zoom, and for an hour, I answer whatever question they have. If they have a tapping request, we do some tapping together. If they have a question about how I run my business, work with difficult clients, approach a particular issue, we answer those questions. Well, earlier this week, I actually ran one of those office hour sessions, not just for my students, but for anybody who wanted to show up. And so what I'd like to share with you right now is a portion of that office hours. You're going to see that we're going to be answering questions about how to get more out of tapping, about how I figure out where I want to spend my time and attention, as well as doing some tapping. So I hope you enjoy this recording of my most recent office hours.
So I also have something I want to tap on.
Yep.
I very recently, had the distinct pleasure of becoming aware of an unconscious belief.
Okay.
Which I love, because then you can actually deal with it.
Yep.
And the sentence I heard that went through my head when I was working with someone, there's a part of me that just says, I don't want to be responsible.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm not responsible in my life. I mean, no one would, from the outside, would say Lori's not responsible. But this is the example I think of. I know that having that unconscious belief and that pattern keeps me from things that could actually bring me a lot of joy.
Absolutely.
So the example I think of is, like, I really love dogs.
Yeah.
And I don't want to own a dog because I don't want to be responsible for it.
Well, and sometimes like not wanting to be responsible is a good, thoughtful thing. You know, like one thing we want to be careful about whenever we're like going, oh, I don't want to be responsible, that's bad. Well, for my 20s and my 30s, I was traveling 200 days a year. It's not an issue of being responsible. It's an issue of kindness to an animal. And so I don't want that responsibility, but it's a good thing because I'm the wrong person to be taking that responsibility on. And so we want to be really careful about the value judgment we place upon, I am this thing or I don't want this particular thing. Because in some scenarios, me being willing to be responsible might expand my opportunity, my experiences. And in some scenarios, me not wanting to be responsible is me making a thoughtful, deliberate decision where I'm not creating dependencies, which are not good for me or not good for the people depending on me. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. And where I feel like it holds me back is my not wanting to be responsible has me avoiding things. Like I avoid things.
Great. Take a nice big deep breath for me, okay? And what I want you to do is I know you don't know the answer to this question, but if you did, what goes wrong if you are responsible?
I just don't want it on me if something goes wrong.
Yeah. And why is that bad?
Because I don't want it to be my fault.
Okay. And why?
Something bad or wrong to be my fault.
Yeah. And what goes wrong when it's your fault? Stop trying to figure it out intellectually. Ask the sensation. What goes wrong when it's your fault?
I get rejected is the best word I can think of.
Yeah, that's fine. Tip top of that and just move from point to point. I recognize the fact. The moment I am responsible for something.
There is now a standard.
There's now something I'm being measured up against.
There's something I'm being measured up against.
And since I'm being measured up against something,
And since I'm being measured up against something,
it is possible for me
it is possible for me
not to meet that standard.
not to meet that standard.
And when I don't meet that standard,
And when I don't meet that standard,
everyone who is holding that standard
everyone who is holding that standard
can see that I have failed,
can see that I have failed,
can see that I am not good enough,
can see that I'm not good enough,
can see that I have let them down.
can see that I've let them down.
And so it makes perfect sense
So it makes perfect sense
that there is a part of me
that there's a part of me
that doesn't want to be rejected,
that doesn't want to be rejected,
that doesn't want to be disconnected,
that doesn't want to be disconnected,
that doesn't want to be judged
that doesn't want to be judged
as I am navigating my life.
as I am navigating my life.
And so if there are no standards
So if there are no standards
that I have to live up to,
that I have to live up to,
then I can't fail.
then I can't fail.
And if I can't fail,
And if I can't fail,
I can't be judged.
I can't be judged.
And if I can't be judged,
And if I can't be judged,
I can't be rejected.
I can't be rejected.
Which sounds like a perfectly good plan,
It sounds like a perfectly good plan,
except for the fact
except for the fact
it makes my world so small.
that it makes my world so small.
And I miss out on so many rich experiences.
And I miss out on so many rich experiences.
And so I give myself permission to know
So I give myself permission to know
it is possible for me
it is possible for me
to navigate this in such a way
to navigate this in such a way
where I can
where I can
evaluate
evaluate
a standard that I would be held to.
a standard that I would be held to.
And if it's reasonable for me to live up to that,
And if it's reasonable for me to live up to that,
because I have spent my entire life
because I've spent my entire life
successfully living up to standards.
successfully living up to standards.
And there have even been circumstances
And there's even been circumstances
where I did not live up to those standards,
where I did not live up to those standards,
and I was okay.
and I was okay.
And it was no big deal.
And it was no big deal.
And allowing myself
And allowing myself
to know that it is possible for me
to know that it is possible for me
to fail
to fail
and still be safe
and still be safe
doesn't mean that I will all of a sudden
doesn't mean that I will all of a sudden
become reckless,
become reckless,
become careless,
become careless,
become thoughtless,
become thoughtless,
just because I recognize
just because I recognize
standards are not a life and death matter.
standards are not a life and death matter.
It does not mean
It does not mean
I'm going to become super casual
I'm going to become super casual
and stop living up to
and stop living up to
what is useful and appropriate.
what is useful and appropriate.
Nice big deep breath. Okay, and what do you notice now?
The word that comes to me is I notice I have a feeling of more grace toward myself.
Good. And
Yeah.
again, like we keep, one of the things that's really important for us to recognize, we talked about a little bit just a moment ago, is just this all or nothing nature of the subconscious mind. Because the subconscious mind recognizes every single time I consider and think, I spend energy. And if I'm spending energy right now, it means I have less energy for some unknown danger that is coming around the corner. And so what it does, it just flattens everything out into all or nothing propositions so that in the future, I don't have to worry about those particular things. And so it's just a way of the system keeping safe. And so part of being gentle with ourselves is also recognizing that I can be safe and it doesn't have to be all or nothing for me to be safe.
Right.
Question about of you.
Yeah, please.
I have this correct, I think I heard you say once that when you're sometimes you notice that what you're doing, what you're enjoying, starts to fade away. Like your clients might start get
Hmm.
less, or something can happen, and it's
Yeah.
usually a transgression or a transformation to a next stage.
Yeah.
What do you do when that starts to happen? Um, do you
Yeah.
notice each time? I'm curious because I think I heard you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm guessing the story that you've heard me talk about is now on four different occasions, and outgrow is the wrong word because outgrow
Mm,
implies like I'm moving to a level that they're not. But I have
mm,
evolved into a place that is not in line with my audience.
yeah.
And in three of those four occasions, my audience figured it out before I did. And so what happened was the first two times I had a whole bunch of clients just fire me all at once. And it was kind of freaky. And then the space immediately filled in after the fact with something else that was different. And so in
Oh,
hindsight, I went, oh, so the first time it happened, it just, once once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, three times is a pattern. So when it was happening the third time, where all of a sudden there was just like, and I was getting like clients were letting me go for reasons that were not rational. So, for example, I had a client say, "You're not a good fit for me because while we were doing a session, I heard ice clinking in your glass. So it's obvious you're not present to me during our session." Now, the reason ice was clinking in my glass was it was 104 degrees in Baltimore, Maryland. I was on the phone. I turned off the air conditioning so I could be heard, and I literally was just sitting there in my underwear, sweating, drinking ice water, and I was drinking ice water to be present. But when we want a way out, we're looking for a reason for a way out. So the third time it happened, I'm like, oh, this is happening again because the reason why people were wandering away wasn't making like it wasn't adding up in my head. And I looked to the two previous times, went, ah, that's what's going on. Now, the fourth time it happened, I didn't recognize it because it wasn't with my clients, it was with my students. So it wasn't one on one, it was with other things that I was doing. And a couple of weeks into it, I went, oh, yeah, this is what's going on. So the process that I went through was number one, I just noticed it and I didn't do anything about it. I went,
mhm,
oh, okay, right now, the stuff that I am doing and who I am internally apparently are incongruent. Awesome. I am now aware of that. And it's almost like I just opened this little tab in the back of the browser of my subconscious mind and I just went, huh, that's really, really interesting. Now, I made sure, even with that resistance and all that was going on, the responsibilities and the commitments I had made, I was making sure that I was showing up and I was doing the best that I can in everything that I was doing, but I was just letting it noodle around. So then, after about 5 or 6 weeks, it felt like I was starting, like, it wasn't, it was like, it was springtime. Like it felt like things were starting to pop out of the ground and it wasn't an organized garden, but there was something there. So what I did was and whenever I'm doing big picture processing, there are always two things that are true for me if I can do that. Number one, I do the processing through a pen on a piece of paper and I just write things out and I process better that way, even though I'm digital in all sorts of ways. Number two, I try and do it in a third space. And what I mean by a third space is not where I work and not where I live. So, primarily for me, third spaces are wine bars, coffee shops, park benches, trains, airplanes, like spaces that for whatever reason are open and different and not where I am normally. And I let things kind of gestate that way. So in that particular case, what I did was I went and I sat down and I just went, okay, what are all the things that I really love right now in the work that I'm doing? Because for me, it was in my work. It wasn't other parts of my life. And so I started making a list of all of the things that I loved in work. And so what happened was, and I'll even draw you a little picture. I can show you what happened. Give me a second here. My iPad will show up here in a moment. So I had this list of all of these things that were really resonating with me. And what I came to realize is they basically fell into one of three areas: helping people to consistently take action to create authentic lives, teaching sophisticated tapping tools so people could go deeper faster, having conversations about life, universe, God, and everything, and what's the meaning of all of that. So things kind of fell into those three areas. So then what I did is I just did a Venn drawing or Venn diagram. And I basically labeled the Venn diagram those three things. Then I took every single thing in my professional life and I started adding it to this diagram. Now, almost everything I was doing overlapped between two areas, but some of them were in one and some were in one. I don't think any of them were all three of them. But then there were also a number of things that didn't show up in the diagram. And so what I did is I started listing those off to the right. So my first job after I did that was to go, awesome. Which of these things that are no longer in sync with who I am and what's going on, which of them are things that I can start letting go of? And how can I start letting go of them in a graceful way? Now, some of them I could just stop. Some of them were commitments over time where I had other things I needed to be doing with them. And so it's like, great, I'm going to do this for another 3 weeks or 3 months or whatever it is, and start communicating with the folks that were going on. Then, so I immediately just started clearing my plate, which gave me more room and capacity to do the things that I loved. Then at the exact same time, I went, awesome. If this is the way my life is heading professionally, what are the things that I'm doing right now that I can amplify because I really like them to do them in a more because I hadn't laid it out in this way. I was just doing things that I loved. Now I had a lens going, oh, these are the things that I love. Let's do these things with deliberate intent. Let's step into them in a way where I'm amplifying and trying to do them more and trying to do them better. And instead of doing it with 3 people, trying to do it with 10 people and just thinking strategically, how do I grow those things? And that then became a process that unfolded over months. It wasn't like something like, it wasn't just like Saturday afternoon, great, this is now what my life looks like. For me, I recognize the fact, like, one of the things I often talk about is the fact that I'm the most conservative entrepreneur you're ever going to meet. Like, I make really big swings, but they're really deliberate and they're really thoughtful. I do very few things just on a whim. If you follow me, one of the things that you're going to notice over the course of the next 6 months is there's going to be at least one 60-second tapping short on YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels and 3 YouTube videos a week. And that wasn't a whim. That was a really thoughtful, deliberate strategy behind trying to do a whole bunch of things, me and my team thinking about the way of doing all of that. And part of it is fitting into these things about how do I use my gifts and talents and impact and make a difference in a way that is useful for the world and is also useful for me and my business. But it's this kind of this dance inside of that sort of stuff as I'm trying to figure out how things do into that. Because the other thing is at no matter how inspired and clear that Saturday afternoon as I was sitting in the back garden at the Copper Mug coffee shop over on North 4th Street here in my neighborhood, no matter how clear that felt, that was still the first draft of this. That was March of 2 years ago. It was April of last year. So there's been a year of growth into this thing, and I'm still pivoting and learning and understanding what this means and how I structure my day and my time. But it was a process of going, first noticing, giving that space, giving that time, not trying to do an answer. Then starting to go, okay, great. What is more useful for me? Then going, awesome. Because time is a zero-sum game. If I'm doing one thing, I can't be doing everything else. And so if I have a bunch of things that are not the right fit for me, not only are they the not right fit for me, but they're also taking my time and attention from the things that are. So then the next step was eliminating the things that were no longer useful to me. Then going, awesome, now the things that I love, how can I amplify them in such a way that they meet my needs? And sometimes meeting my needs is doing something I enjoy. Sometimes meeting my needs is making a difference in the world. Sometimes meeting my needs is making sure that I am able to afford the lifestyle that I've come accustomed to. Like, all of those things exist inside of that. But for me, it's become more and more vital for me to deliberately be investing my time. And that doesn't mean I do things that I love all the time. One of the things that I'm going to be deliberately investing my time on Wednesday is finishing up my taxes for my business and me as an individual. And I'm guessing that there is no amount of tapping that is ever going to make me love that action. Now, I'm open to the possibility that my mind will be changed around that.
Okay.
But it's a good investment of time, because then I don't get, here in the United States, a white envelope with a green certified thing across the top from a little government organization that has 3 letters associated with it. Like, that's not the thing I want to engage with. And so doing a good job with this now creates capacity and space so I don't have problems later, because it is my responsibility as a business owner in the United States to do those particular things.
Yeah.
But like being really deliberate about that. And it was, and the reality is like this big picture thinking, I do it like once every 9 to 18 months. I'm not constantly revisiting my mission and vision and how it's going on. I'm constantly making changes to my plans and executing in the projects I'm working on and that sort of stuff. And oftentimes, as I'm doing all of those things, I'm writing with my right hand and I'm tapping with my left hand as I'm doing that thing, and I'm getting clarity in that particular space. But what it is it's an opportunity for me to think about it in those particular ways. And, the reality is that like I have a lifestyle that allows me to be more deliberate about that. The more we move up Maslow's hierarchy of our needs being met in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the more luxurious time we can allow to have these existential questions. Like if I'm struggling to pay rent this month, it's probably not a really good investment of my time pondering my, how I'm going to impact the world in a long-term way. Not that I need to dismiss that, but I also need to make sure that I'm resourced in such a way so I can actually do stuff in the world.
Yeah.
Much the same way I won't work with 37 clients in one day, because I'm not using my resources well as much as I'd like to make that impact. And if there are people who wanted to work with me in that way, I wouldn't be very good at that. Like I have to take care of me in order to be that thing in the world as well. And for me, there's always that constant tension. And because I happen to be running a successful business at this particular point in my life, I have the luxury to think about those things in a slightly different way. But, there was, when things were going sideways, like I was such a grumpopotamus about the stuff. Like if I wasn't talking into a camera to someone, I was on couch in the bed. Like there were a number of weeks that were really hard in the process of being disconnection and dealing with things that I wasn't investing my time and attention in a way that was making a difference and doing what I loved. So like in that case, there was real consequence to being in that space. And I kept showing up and kept being helpful as I could for the people I'd committed to, and then disconnected and got out of here because that's what I needed to do to be healthy as well.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? That's a long way around.
Yes. I think it does, because it sort of happened to me for a little bit, like that unusual cancellations and not showing up. And I thought, okay, I do remember you saying this, and it can be a little bit frustrating. And did you feel, sounds like it was a metamorphosis, like when you're in that chrysalis and you're all that gooey bleh, and then a beautiful butterfly emerges at the end after you've worked through. And it doesn't happen like that. It takes that.
And also, for me, what oftentimes happens is I change, but I'm still habitually acting in the exact same way. It's kind of like all of a sudden you look down, you're like, oh my gosh, my pants are 2 inches too short. Like I was growing that entire time. Yeah. And the rest of the world now saw me as 5'10" and not 5'8". But internally, I was still acting habitually out of the old identity of myself. In order for true transformation to happen, we have to see ourselves differently, we have to see the world differently, or we have to see both differently. Yeah. And so even though the transformation had happened and the world was recognizing it, I was not. So it wasn't like it's like, oh, I'm a beautiful butterfly. Like I was a beautiful butterfly and didn't even realize it. Like I was still acting like a caterpillar and did not recognize the transformation it completed. And so that's a different part of it, is because I have a habitual understanding of myself the exact same way I have habitual understandings of the people around me. Even though I'm that close to myself, I don't realize that.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Gina. You bet. How can I be helpful?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of reconcile something for myself. I guess I'm kind of thinking a lot about being efficient or effective. So just the difference, I know you've done a lot of work with the Peaceful Heart Network and how, they do the trauma tapping and there's like no words. You're not,
Yeah.
as far as like my understanding, there's no words.
Yeah.
Versus like what they tell us, to be specific, find that event where that memory has been unprocessed. So yeah, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So this is, and for those who have been around me a little bit over the last couple of months, you've heard me talk about this, but I think this is key. Like in the last 9 months, this is a radical transformation for myself. And the transformation is I have moved. Tapping for me used to be an approach. Tapping is now a tool. And this is what I mean by that. And I'll use an analogy to describe it. So a knife, a cutting edge is a tool. And with a cutting edge, I can cut a piece of bread. I can specifically cut vegetables so it cooks in a Thai way. I can specifically cut fish for sushi. I can whittle a pipe out of a stick. I can do surgery. All of them are cutting edges, but the way the cutting edge is applied is going to make a difference based on the task and based on the skill of the person who's there. Just because I can cut bread does not mean I should be doing surgery, but they're basically being done with the exact same instrument. So for me, tapping is a tool that I used based on the approach that is in front of me. Okay. So if I'm in a situation where the problem I'm trying to solve is I'm trying to downregulate my emotional state so I can be regulated and calm inside of the moment. When I'm doing that sort of tapping, typically that is tapping that I can do without words because I'm in a circumstance where all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to process cortisol out of my body and I can just move through that. Now, if I'm in a circumstance where I am trying to clear a limiting belief, oftentimes having the story from the subconscious mind, like the tapping that we were doing with Lori around this fact of, I don't want to take responsibility because if I take responsibility, I can fail and I can let other people down, which leads to disconnection. So because we're not just trying to downregulate the emotion, but we're actually trying to change something, then using a more sophisticated approach is a useful thing to do. The other thing that's also really important to recognize is the context. So one of the reasons why Wolf and Gunilla have developed TTT, what they use when they're doing the Peaceful Heart Network work stuff is they recognize the fact that one, they're often working in group settings. Two, they're working in group settings where there isn't necessarily someone who is a skilled mental health professional. And number three, they don't want to be in a circumstance where they are re-traumatizing someone by having them tell the story. And so sometimes the reason we choose to tap without words has nothing to do with efficiency, and it has everything to doing it in a trauma-informed, safe manner for the people who are in front of us and what's going on. And so the tool, the technique, the approach that we use for me has all of these elements of the context. Am I by myself? Am I working with someone else? Is it public? Is it private? Am I skilled in the area? Am I not skilled in the area? Can I do this in a trauma-informed way? Am I not doing this in a trauma-informed way? Which is going to impact what I'm doing and how I'm approaching it. The other thing that's really important for me is I have gotten, as a practitioner, I have gotten so much slower over the course of the last 3 years. And what I mean by that is I'm in less of a rush to solve a problem for 2 reasons. One, I want to make sure I have a lasting solution. And so going slower oftentimes means that we're picking off more aspects along the way and we're getting more clarity. And number 2, I'm much more likely to do it in a way that is safe for the person I'm working with because I'm not pushing them ahead so quickly because we want to be successful. Because one of the things that's really important, at least for me to recognize, is that compared to other modalities, tapping is significantly faster. But sometimes tapping being significantly faster might be 12 one-hour sessions. And 12 one-hour sessions doesn't feel like that's incredibly fast. Except for the fact in other modalities, it might be weekly for 3 years to get the exact same amount of progress. And so for me, there's also been this recalibration of what does effective and efficient look like when I'm stepping into something. And so for me, I'm going to err on the side of slower and gentler than I am going to be in finding the most efficient, effective way to create transformation. So much so, like I have a little reminder of 4 things that I read to myself before every single client session I do to make sure that I'm being present. And the second thing on here says, ask one more question. Because for me, it's really easy to get like a piece of information or something. Oh, I know how to tap on that thing, or oh, there's a memory. Let's go after that thing. And for me, it's like, okay, that's true. But let's take 8 seconds and ask one more question. And maybe it's fruitful, maybe it's not. But if it's fruitful, oh my gosh, we're a level deeper, which is going to allow the work that we're doing to be more effective once we actually get to that level down. Is that answering your question? That's a lot of ideas in a giant stew that I don't know if it's useful or not.
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is, say the people in Africa that have experienced really traumatic things.
Yeah.
Are they experiencing lasting change? Are they actually healing the PTSD from what they've, you know what I mean, without having to go? I mean, again, I don't know. I've never seen it.
Yeah, and so again, like one of the things that's really important for us to recognize when we're dealing with transformation is to recognize the fact that transformation is not an all or nothing proposition. A concept that I learned from Dan Cleary, my buddy Dan Cleary, he's a hypnotist that does pain management. He talks about the 10% solution. And when I studied with him over a decade, the stat he had at the time, I don't know if it is still the case, but the stat he had at the time was people spent between 5 and 7 years in traditional medicine before they came to a hypnotist for pain management. And they would sit down with Dan, and they'd talk about what's going on. Dan would be like, well, after 90 minutes of hypnosis, you'd be pain-free. How does that sound? We're like, that'd be awesome. And he's like, forget it. It's not going to happen. He goes, but tell me how your life would be different if half the pain went away. Tell me how your life would be different if 25% of the pain went away. Tell me how your life would be different if 10% of the pain went away. Now, for someone who has back issues, maybe reduction by 10% means I can sit for 2 hours. Well, now I can go to a movie. Now I can go to dinner. I still have pain, but my life is radically different. And so when we're dealing with things like deep trauma from being in the middle of genocide, like the folks that we got a chance to meet and work with in Rwanda, that impacts lots and lots of areas of your life. And if you're in a circumstance where tapping all of a sudden gives you liberty and freedom for a period of time, that is the success that we're working towards and we're moving forward. I had a client, we weren't working on this. This was something that she reported to me. We were working on something else, but she regularly experienced seizures and she'd found a new treatment. So she was only having seizures 6 days a week. And that was the word she used. I'm only having seizures 6 days a week. Because she recognized all of a sudden she had one full day that went completely as planned and she did everything that she wanted to, and she wasn't embarrassed and she wasn't injured and anything like that. And the quality of her life improved because they went from a daily occurrence to a 6-day-a-week occurrence. And so in a circumstance like that, there are degrees of transformation. You know, one of the stories that will live with me forever, we were doing a training there and like this woman was talking about the rain. And how she could listen to the rain now. And for me, I grew up in the desert. I mean, I grew up in Wyoming. Like rain is still magic to me. Like it rains here in New York and I will still just stop and put my face up because it's this magical thing.
Well, it rains all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The opposite of that. And the genocide, the Rwandan genocide, the 100 days of the Rwandan genocide happened in the rainy season. So rain got tied to all of the horrors of that particular thing. And she was giving her testimonial about her experience. And I love the fact that they use that word, their testimonial. She was giving her testimonial about that experience and was talking about how she could now listen to the rain. Now, she is not done on her transformational journey, but because she had a simple wordless tool, because she was experiencing an emotion while it was raining and was able to downregulate that emotion, slowly over time was able to train her system that rain does not equal danger, because through memory consolidation, we're rewriting what's going on in the subconscious mind. And now all of a sudden she has freedom for 100 days during the rainy season because that's not something she's dealing with. Now, there are still things that she sees in her community and family members that she is missing and all of that sort of stuff that is still part of that experience. That was in 1994. You know, I mean, we're a long way away from that, and that's still a part of her life. But there's a difference inside of that as well. And so as we're doing this, the other thing is for me is to consistently recognize what's the value of an incremental transformation. Because for some of those transformations, so let's again, it's not that when it rains today, I'm not triggered. It's for the rest of my life, every single time it rains. And so all of a sudden, this moment of healing multiplies by hundreds, if not thousands, of experiences over the course of the next multiple decades. And so also for me, constantly reframing my understanding of what does success mean as I'm stepping into something like that. The other thing is like sometimes we only have access to a limited resource. And so we're going to go as far as we can with a limited resource, to have a skilled psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor, nurse who's deeply trained in one of these tools. Absolutely, they're probably going to go deeper, faster, further with that transformation than learning a wordless tool that they're working on their own. But in the context and the circumstance, that's the tool they have access to in the moment, which creates the step forward for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that was super, super, super valuable. Oh my gosh, thank you.
You bet.
And it was addressing some of what I wanted to ask you about when you were talking about recognizing your own transformation. That was so powerful.
Yeah.
So when we've been on this journey for years and years, and you talked, I remember once about the frustration of always being in process.
Yeah.
So I totally identify with that. It's just been decades. It's like, oh my gosh. So this is really gold, as far as that ability to recognize what's different, what's working. And I was, and I really appreciate the different sayings that you use consistently. I recognize the fact, and I give myself permission to, they're very good. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and I'm going to let you decide where you're going to put any of this, because you were talking about realizing that you had transformed, but you were doing things the same. So I'm doing some self-reflection and realizing there's a lot that's changed, and there are parts of me that are not up to that change place yet.
Yeah.
And I can see that there's parts that are afraid, and because the health has not been good for decades. And I can see there are parts that don't want to let go, because almost like the person who was speaking about responsibility, someone asked me that question. They said, well, what would happen if you were healthy?
Yeah.
What does that mean for you? Like, if I'm healthy, then. And all of a sudden I thought, ooh, there's resistance. And so if we've been working on issues for a really long time, and it's many layered, and we want to get to those deeper places that are hiding because there's a lot of fear, how do we get there? And also, how do we recognize when we have made that progress as well? So I think you know where I'm going with all of this. I'm just going to let you.
So for me, so for me, like one of the ways that I always describe myself is I describe myself as a practitioner, as a practicalist. And what I mean by that is the work I want to do, I want to have a practical impact in my life. Now, practical doesn't necessarily mean utilitarian. I have spent, I've spent hundreds of hours this calendar year with a deck of cards in my hand, working on my double lifts and my undercuts and all of that sort of stuff. And I'm not going to go off and become a professional magician. Like the practical nature of that is I really enjoy that. So so practical means, why do I want to do the thing? Okay. And so for me, if I'm trying to figure out whether or not transformation has occurred, or how do I unpack the thing that is getting in the way, I go and I try and take an action, because my subconscious mind is going to try and prevent me from taking an action that thinks is unsafe or in alignment with how it defines itself. And so I imagine so if I want to see a change in a certain area of my life, If I want to see a change in my romantic life, I imagine asking people on dates and going on dates and having a relationship. If I want to see a change in my health, I imagine myself doing the thing or having the success of the thing. And then I just start paying attention to the resistance that shows up inside of my body. One of the questions that people ask all the time is like, well, should I tap on positive phrases or should I tap on negative phrases? It doesn't matter on a certain level because the subconscious mind is going to speak up. So if I go, I can't lose weight. I've tried before. I failed before. I'm going to fail again. My subconscious mind goes, yeah, you failed before, you failed again. Awesome. Tappable issue. But if I say, I'm going to go lose weight, your subconscious mind's going to go, no, you're not. You failed before. You're going to fail again. So it doesn't matter if I'm in tune with it or I'm going against it. The subconscious mind is either going to affirm the thing that I don't like, or the subconscious mind's going to go, no, this is why you're wrong. And so anytime I try and do something that my subconscious mind thinks is unsafe in some way, and that could be unsafe in my community, it could be unsafe because of judgment, it could be unsafe because I'm actually going to be physically harmed by that particular thing, it's going to speak up. It's always, always, always going to speak up. The subconscious mind, if it fears something is going to go wrong, it is never going to hold its tongue. Now I can ignore it and I can override it and it doesn't necessarily control me. But for me, I imagine doing it. And so for me, the simplest way for me to do that is I sit at my desk and I imagine myself taking an action and I just feel my body. And as I feel into my body, it's going to tell me if that's in alignment with my subconscious mind and my subconscious beliefs or not. And then when I get resistance, it's tightness in the chest, it's butterflies in the stomach, it's a wall in front of me, it's reins pulling me back, it's a chattery brain. I then ask that part questions. The tightness in my chest, what do you think is going to go wrong? What proof do you have that's going to happen? And so that's the way I start to unpack and find those stories. When you go back and you rewatch the recording of this when we publish it later, you'll actually hear me doing that with Lori. What goes wrong? What proof do you have? What goes wrong? What proof do you have? And inside, and there are a couple, at one point you even saw her go, huh? Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's the thing that's underneath here. Because we're asking the subconscious mind, okay, if this is true, tell me why. And what it does is it gives us the ability to lean in and understand and hear in that particular way. And so for me, as a practical nature, if I'm ever struggling to figure out where the resistance is, I imagine doing something in the direction that I want to go, and then I treat the resistance as if it has agency and I start asking it questions.
Yeah, I like that. That's very good. So what happened when you realized that, like you were saying, the rest of the world recognized that you had changed in some very positive ways, but somehow you were doing things in the same way?
Yeah.
How did that become congruent for you?
Well,
how did you recognize that?
Well, in that case, the way I recognized it, I had a whole bunch of clients fire me. Like there was visible change in my environment that things were really, really out of whack. Okay. So one is the way people respond to us. The other is internally. Like if I take, so the place I want to be at this point in my life, the place I want to be is I want to consciously be doing everything, even really dumb things, really unuseful things, really like I just want to be conscious about all of those things. What I don't want to do is I don't want to be watching TV and all of a sudden there is this empty can of Pringles next to me and there is fake sour cream dust all over me. Like that's the place I don't want to be. Where I want to be is these are reconstituted pieces of potato that are smashed together into something unnatural with a bunch of chemicals that I'm choosing to eat right now. And I know that they're bad for me, but I'm choosing to do that. And I'm going to live with the consequences. Okay. And so when I am consciously doing things, I'm getting a chance to listen interiorly to what's going on. So I'm not just going through the motions.
Okay,
so
well, no, I get what you're saying. It's good. So I'm going to ask then something more specific. So if there's something that, like I've been dealing with something for quite a long time around the health issues.
Yep.
Because it's been ongoing for so long.
Yep.
And I've worked on the parts that maybe are afraid to show up because of so many bad things that happen. Oh my gosh, what if somebody sees you healthy and takes you out, and all kinds of things go on in the head. So when there are things that are very, very deep, and we get the sense like maybe the whole body shuts down when we ask certain questions. Like it can be really strong. The reactions, we go, oh, that's information I can work with. But like we can peel things off layers, layers, layers. And do we just like expect at some point there's going to be a final breakthrough, or sometimes things are hiding so deep that we're not really getting to the core?
Who knows? Like with we put infinite monkeys in a room with infinite typewriters. Eventually they come up with Shakespeare. At a certain point we'll get to the root cause if we have enough time and energy to go after something. The thing that I like to do when I recognize the fact that I'm going to be unfinished is a couple of things. Number one is I want to focus my efforts of transformation on the areas that are going to have the highest impact in my life. Number two, when I'm in a circumstance that things are going slower than I would like to when I'm working on my own, I reach out for help. I work with clients daily, and I also work with practitioners because I recognize I'm too close to things, and sometimes that's what's going on. And it could be a limiting belief of mine, but like I'm never going to be 7'2". Like there's a physical limitation to what I'm going to be in this world. I'm probably never going to dunk a basketball ever again like I could when I was 21 years old. Like those
that is
things,
such a good point. That is such a good point, to be realistic about where we are, to just really be realistic.
And there's a difference between realistic and fatalistic. There's a difference between being realistic and being pessimistic. The other thing that I like doing is, when I'm trying to create change, there's two phrases that I like to use. This or something better. Bring this to me in a way that is so wacky, I know your hand's involved and I can't miss it. And those two phrases are super valuable to me because it's really easy for me to be emotionally attached to not my highest good. And I think it's my highest good. And what those phrases are about me opening my subconscious mind for other options and other opportunities. Because like I'm really competent, and more than being really competent, I'm convinced that I'm really competent. And so it's easy for me to believe I'm more capable than I actually am. I'm very, very good at believing I'm more capable than I actually am because I'm really, really capable and I have lots of proof that I'm capable. And it's easy for me to inflate that. And so by constantly going, this is something better, bring this to me in a way that's so wacky I don't miss it, gives me the opportunity to have my eyes open to new opportunities and new possibilities. Hello.
Hello. Hi. This is my first time here, so wow.
It's all good.
This is great. This is amazing. I think I've been looking for this, but I'm a very new practitioner, so I would ask, what advice do you have for a brand new practitioner in EFT? I'm a hands-on practitioner on PBA, and I'm just going to be starting into this, and of course I've worked with other people hands-on, and it's very different. But I'm hearing you, and I'm loving this exchange and information because it's really what most people are looking for, I think, as a practitioner.
Great. So so a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, it's the old Hippocratic oath: do no harm. Like for me, the first priority and the most important priority is at the end of every interaction I have with someone, any human, particularly my clients, they leave as healthy, if not healthier, than when they showed up. So much so, like I'm really, really conscious and deliberate about like when we do something emotional, re-raveling someone before returning them to the world. Like going slower. Like you heard me talk about all of those things, asking one more question, like being really, really clear about them, but also being really, really clear about my skills and my capacity. One of my favorite ideas is if you are not qualified to work on an issue without tapping, tapping does not qualify you to work on that issue. Tapping is not a qualifying tool. Tapping is a tool that allows us to go to the places that is safe for us to go and be more efficient and be a better helper in that particular space. Um, I'm like, God bless Gary Craig and all that he's brought to the world. Try it on anything. I don't think that is not a trauma-informed, helpful approach. And that's something as a community. It's been fun, over the last 20 years, watching the community grow up and understand that in really thoughtful and deliberate ways. And for me, particularly when I'm new, I'm going to err on the side of caution, and I'm going to be okay with that. The second thing that's really important to recognize is that transformation is relative. And what is heroic, what is monumental, what is life-changing is defined by the client and not by us. I got an email from a client that said I made 2 phone calls today, and that made me cry because that was a heroic change in her life because she was now making phone calls. Like that truly was transformational for her. And so, like, we want 1-minute miracles and big, deep transformation and all of that. And I just want your afternoon to be better. I just want you to be a little more grounded. I want you to be a little more connected to what your authentic self is. I want you to love yourself a little deeper. I want your body to be a little healthier. And incrementally doing that over and over and over and over and over again. And for me, like, at the beginning of my career, I took a lot of pride and a lot of joy in the deep transformation that I helped someone have. And that's great that that's the case. But my value as a practitioner, my value as a tapper, my value as a coach is not in that. Like, people want to be making progress and we want them to be making progress. And that's all a good and great thing. And like, if you're in a boat, I did the math the other day. If you're in a boat leaving New York Harbor and you're going to the East Coast or the West Coast of the United Kingdom, and you change the boat's trajectory by 1 degree, you change where you land in Europe by 257 miles. And you on a boat would not recognize the difference of a boat moving 1 degree to the north or 1 degree to the south. But on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, it's hundreds of miles difference. And so getting into that and not having my identity as a practitioner tied into the success my clients were reporting. Because some of the transformation our clients have becomes the new normal so quickly, they forget what's going on. I do intake forms when I'm working with clients over a long period of time, and very regularly and very typically somewhere between session 4 and session 6, a client will say to me, Gene, you are so charming. You're the funniest person I know. My life lights up every time I talk to you. I'm being sarcastic. But what they do say is, but I don't know if we're really getting anywhere. Like, I enjoy our time, but we're not doing that. I'm like, awesome. Let's take a look at your intake form. Let's see where you were a month ago. So much so, I one time had a client call himself a liar. He said, oh, I was exaggerating. It wasn't really that bad. I was just being exaggerated because I was filling an intake form. He wasn't. I remember our initial conversations. He was in that much pain. He was in that much distress. But the difficulty with the type of transformation we help with is we are removing things in most cases. And I can complain all day about really tight shoes, and I take them off, and for about 10 minutes I can still feel my really tight shoes, and 15 minutes later I can't tell that I was wearing bad shoes all day long, assuming I didn't like cut my heel from it. Like, it was just the tension on it. And I put the same dumb shoes on 3 days later because I've forgotten. And so the same thing happens when we're working with transformation, is that it's so super easy for us not to recognize how far we've gone, that the people who are helping us aren't going to get the credit and credibility for that. And so being able to not have your identity as a practitioner, and again, tied to the success our clients are reporting, because sometimes they have success they don't even report, and we're going to miss it altogether. So those are kind of like the first things that I think are really, really useful. Go slow, keep them safe, don't have your identity tied up in their success. And if you do that, it's going to be significantly easier. The other thing is that, when you're working with a client, the way I like to think of myself is I want to show up as the color of water. And what I mean by that is my worldview is unimportant. It's the client's worldview that we're working within. And now that doesn't mean I have to work with everybody. Like, I am not going to help some executive running a neo-Nazi organization be more efficient in his day so they can be more better hateful people with greater efficiency. I'm not going to work with everyone. And I need to have some simpatico with their worldview enough that I can connect with them. But it's their language, it's their vocabulary, it's their experience. That's what I'm trying to be. And so I have to bring my skills and leave my worldview. And that's a really, really difficult thing because my worldview is who I am. That's the way I define myself. And as an example of this, I think I told this when we did office hours last week as well. I was working with a client, lived in Vancouver, British Columbia, pierced nose, tattooed, colored hair. We did a session that was unimpressive in my mind. And we're at the 50-minute mark. And in my head, I'm like, oh, this is very early on in my career. That wasn't a very good session. We didn't get very far. So we were just doing a little guided imagery to tighten the whole thing up. And at the end of it, I said, great, what'd you notice? And she said, in the middle of that, Jesus showed up. Pause, pause, pause. I haven't thought about him in a really long time. Pause, pause, pause. But I think that's a good thing. Now, if she would have known at that point in my life, my primary income was speaking to young people inside the context of youth ministry in the Catholic Church, we never would have been on the phone because she would have made assumptions about me and my worldview and my disposition that she would have decided was not in sync with who she is. And that doesn't mean I hide who I am, but then we got to have a conversation that we wouldn't have had otherwise, that I was skilled and capable of having. But it was about her worldview. It wasn't about mine. It was about her agenda. It wasn't about mine. And as we're learning skills, we're like, ooh, I can. And being able to sit back and listen more is, again, number 2, ask one more question. Like, I've been working with clients for over 15 years, and I have to remind myself before every single client session so I don't get ahead because I want to use my really fun skills. Is that useful?
Very useful. Thank you so much. I really
awesomeness. Well, I really hope you enjoyed those questions, those answers. I hope you're in a circumstance where you understand tapping a little better and that you can get more out of your tapping practice. What I'd really encourage you to do right now, if there was an insight or something that really resonated with you or rung true in your heart, if you could do me a favor, go down to the comment section and just put that little insight in a comment. That's going to do 2 things. Number 1, it's going to help me to recognize the things that I'm sharing that are valuable so that I can share them more and more often. The second is, if you take a moment and you jot that down, you type it out, you're going to make it a little bit more permanent inside of your head, which is going to make it even easier for you to access in the future. Now, if you enjoyed office hours like this, like I said, I actually do office hours 4 times a month. We have students gathering from all over the world, and I have a number of them who show up for the office hours even when they don't have a question, because simply hearing other people ask questions enhances and deepens their learning experience. And right now, we're running a special offer. You can join the program, have access to the classes, all the past recordings, and access to all 4 office hours in the next calendar month for only $1. If you'd like more information on the program, if you'd like to join us and have your questions answered for only $1, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/$1. That's tappingqa.com/$1. If you got any questions about the program, please let me know. I can always be reached at support@tappingqa.com. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.